It's alright, my love. You can cry to me.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 32 of the Masterpeace Podcast. Today we're in conversation with Ngawang Rigsar Wangchuk, who is currently a digital nomad working for Save the Children International to help young people in about 20 countries to design and lead advocacy campaigns. Rigsar grew up in remote Tote Geog in Paro, and he left Bhutan when he was only 15, and then spent the next 7 years in the USA as he completed his high school and his college. In college, he studied political science and philosophy. And Rigsar also has a master's degree in international development from the University College London. He's currently the president of the Bhutan Tshering Alumni Network and also works as a team member for Touching the Earth. Rigsar enjoys blogging, music, reading, and animals. His biggest accomplishment in life is bagging his wife, Chimi Nangsel Doji. That's my favorite line from the bio. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Thank you. Hi, Rigsar. Welcome to Masterpiece.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's an honor to have you here today. This is episode 32, and we relaunched the Masterpiece Podcast with episode 31 with Her Excellency Dash Wangmu, which we were so lucky to be able to film at the PEMA Secretariat itself. But going forward, this will largely be this is our new Masterpiece Podcast set. So it's really a wonderful opportunity to commemorate this, having someone such as yourself for this conversation.
Thank you for those kind words.
Thank you, Rigsar. So let's get started. Please tell me a little bit about your youth, your formative years, as we talked about previously.
Well, I think for a large part of my childhood, at least, even though as you introduced in the introduction, I grew up in a very remote part of Paro. Back then, there was just a feeder road, and even being able to go into Paro town to do our annual school shopping was like a trip that I looked forward to. So it was quite far away, and also, my family, we're from the east. So when I was growing up there, we were, I think, as far as I can remember, the only Shashok family there as well. But I don't know, I never felt out of place. And even when I go back to Paro, I always, I don't know, I guess you have this sort of love for the place where you grew up, regardless of what it is. Playing archery when the rice paddies were like harvested and empty. So, and I think academically as well, like I somehow, I moved to Paro actually when I was in the 3rd grade, and suddenly shot up and somehow topped my class like out of accident. I wasn't aware. Before that, I was briefly here in Thimphu, but I felt like that really sort of set a trajectory for me, a positive trajectory for me, because I'd never seen myself like that. And then on, for most part of my childhood in Paro, I only remember it being mostly happy times, being able to go out and play wherever we wanted till the sun set, until our parents, or in my case, my aunt, because I grew up with her, called us back for dinner and, often scolded us for dirtying our clothes, and, just that kind of experience that I think most of us as children have. And then in 2009, I sort of competed in the Golden Youth Awards that is still ongoing here in Thimphu, I think, which is wonderful. But yeah, I came here. All of us got nominated from each of the Dzongkhaks. I was nominated from. By that time, I'd moved here in Thimphu and I was at Mutthang. So yeah, so that's sort of what opened the door for me in terms of sort of eventually getting a scholarship to be able to study in the US at what is called a United World College. Even though it's a high school, I don't know why it's called college, but So I attended the UWC school in New Mexico, in the US.
And you were 15 when
Yeah,
you
I was
left.
15 back then. My mom was very much against it, because I was sort of a picky eater, very scrawny, boy. So she was scared that I was gonna starve, and no one's gonna be there to sort of feed me. But I don't know, there was something in me that knew that there was a bigger world out there, and that I think even sort of getting it, um, back then it was mostly excitement, but when I look back, I think I also kind of was scared, but also acknowledged that this was going to change me in a pretty fundamental way. And looking back, it definitely did. Yeah.
You had thoughts like that when you were 15 itself,
No,
like,
no,
oh, this is going to
no,
change
no, no,
me.
no. I did
No.
not. That's what I meant. Back then, it was mostly a combination of being scared of the unknown, as I think most of us feel when we go out and try to do something we've never done. Um, yeah, and coming from this sort of remote corner in Paro, to suddenly having to travel, catch flights by myself, and the sort of anxious over preparation, and the 30-some-hour flight to the US. And by the time I got there, I remember I was like a zombie because I couldn't sleep because of anxiety that I was going to miss my flight and not know what to do. But no, back then it was just like mostly a mix of excitement, fear. But even though my mom was against me going, I think I was very adamant and sort of headstrong, that this was something that I had to do,
Mhm.
and I didn't really understand why. But looking back, I'm just trying to sort of place that feeling, and looking back, yeah, it's been one hell of a journey.
Mm. Mm. So, what are some ways in which you changed
Mm,
in terms of like how you see the world
yeah.
and how you see yourself?
Yeah, so that story we often hear about this frog that sort of lives in a well, and another frog from the great big ocean comes and tells this frog in a well about how big his supposed home is, which is the ocean, and this frog in a well has absolutely no way of sort of even imagining that scale. So for me, it was very much like that. When I was growing up in Paro, like I said earlier, I had a very wonderful childhood for the most part, and felt really sort of seen by my friends and admired, and on good terms with teachers, that kind of stuff. And I really had sort of an overinflated sense of self, and I felt that I always had to be seen, and that I was amazing and I was smart, and all these, I think, feelings. Which I think in maybe healthy doses is good, but I think when you sort of overdo it, it leads to this overinflation of the ego, right? So when I went there, I think that's when I had the shock of my life, because here I was, one of the sort of cream of the crop, as they called us back then. Um, Won this prestigious scholarship. I come from a very middle class family, so there's no way my family was going to be able to afford that kind of education for me. But when I got there, I don't know. We in our school, it was a very small school. There was only 11th and the 12th grade, just the last 2 years of high school. And we had about, I think, a little over 200 students from about something like 70 countries, so incredibly diverse. But they were also sort of the best from their respective countries. And when I went there, I just felt like that frog from that well. I felt so shy. I felt like I couldn't speak my mind, and these other young people from the rest of the world, they seem to have their stuff figured out. Like, even in classes and all, they were not shy. So then I had a sort of a rude awakening, because I think back when we were sort of studying in 2010s and all, we were always taught this values of not talking back to your teacher, or waiting until you are sort of addressed to speak, and all of these values that didn't really, I would say, help me. And back then it was very sort of rote, like memorization, like sort of examinations, like sort of regurgitating what you're taught and all that kind of stuff. But when I was there, I could see the level of like sort of independence and critical thinking that other peers seem to have. And I had a really, I think like those 2 years, I mean, it was great, but it was also like a very huge reality check for me about, just in many sense feeling like I didn't belong there, that there were other people in Bhutan who deserved this, and all this feeling of self-doubt and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, but I also met like some of the most wonderful friends who I'm still in touch with. Like there's 3 other friends, like we're very, very close. All of us are from different countries, but back then the world wasn't as globalized and interconnected as it is right now. But sort of the privilege that I feel was back then, it almost was as if we sort of jumped 1 decade into the future and had friends from all different kind of cultures, and like first of all being shocked by the differences, but ultimately living for 2 years together, because it was like a dormitory style setup, really sort of being able to look past these superficial things like languages, culture, and really finding that deep down inside as people we share this common like thing that makes us human, and the way we express love and anger and getting rejected by your crush and all of these sort of things that I think as teenagers we go through, that language was universal. So for me, I think that really shaped me in sort of fundamental way, in the sense that even now when I look at people, I always try to sort of touch base with that part that I know is within every single one of us. And it's really helped me sort of look past the other sort of outer sort of shell of labels, and how a person sort of presents themselves.
So, just as a little context, I think for the audience here, I believe from Masterpiece has done 31 episodes now, and from all the guests that we've had in the 31 episodes, you are an individual who has a background that is very similar to mine.
Yeah.
And it's part of why I was so intrigued and curious to invite you on. And I'm so grateful that you said yes. And so what I mean by our shared experiences is, even I went abroad when I was 11, and I also spent my high school years with a very kids from all over the world.
Yeah.
Just like you said, I'm a few years older than you, but even in my time, they talk about this word third culture kid.
Yes.
Which I don't think that word is relevant anymore. So when we were growing up, when we found ourselves in international settings, there was a lot of conversation on, you are a third culture kid. So in your case, like it would have been, you're a Bhutanese in America, in a school that's not really American. It's like kids are from everywhere.
Yeah.
So there's 3 cultures there. I can't remember the definition of third culture.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the definition is your first culture, like your original one, where you're from, and the second culture is like maybe where you end up. So if you're like the children of diplomats, or maybe you're a mixed child, mixed race. So the third culture is the culture you negotiate
between the two. I see.
Yeah. But I don't think it was really like that for us. Like, I mean, the third culture was being in that international setting.
Yeah.
And now I believe that word has changed. Maybe our producer Pema can check up on that word, third culture kid. Is that the same word that's used today, or is there even another term for it? Because they say now that this experience doesn't just cover people who leave their original countries. We know that nowadays, like our younger cousins, nephews, nieces, they don't even need to leave the country. They just need their smartphone to be like, so globally like influenced or exposed or whatever.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm saying all of this just to try to come to this point of, I kept asking, and you were 15, you were class 10. Like it's so hard being a teenager. I don't need
Yeah.
I don't need to convince anybody of this. I know
Yeah.
most people struggle in their teenage
Yes.
years. You're
Yes.
not a child anymore, but you're not an adult. You're trying to figure out, like, who am I? Like, what
Yeah.
am I supposed to do? Blah, blah, all that. And then, like, you're doing it in such an unfamiliar setting.
Yeah.
It's already out of your comfort zone to go through all these hormonal changes and, make that transition to adulthood. But it's even more uncomfortable to do so in that kind of a
I
setting.
agree. And without the support of your family and your, loved ones, right? Like who are your unconditional place of refuge. Yeah, completely agree. Yeah.
So now my question is, what happens when your unconditional place of refuge, your family, represents your culture, what you know, the values you were brought up with? You were just saying, oh, I was taught not to question the teachers, that would be disrespectful, like that.
Right.
And now you're like, if I don't question them, then I'm not not an independent thinker. Maybe I can't compete with these
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
So then 7 years in the US, it's almost a decade. So how was that in terms of you and your mental health? Because for me personally, in my experience, and how this relates to my mental health, is that the more I adapted in a globalized setting, whether it was an American setting or Thai setting or whatever, I started seeing myself more and more as I belong to the world.
Yeah.
As opposed to I belong to Bhutan. I always felt like I belong to Bhutan because obviously I'm not like, my parents weren't even diplomats, like Bhutanese CID, Bhutanese passport, everything, right?
Yeah.
It's just that I was lucky enough to have the chance to study abroad.
Yeah.
And so the more I learned about global culture, which I would argue is largely Western culture, although it's changing a
now,
little bit now
Yes.
as we become truly more globalized and you see like Korean culture, all that coming in. But it's largely still more westernized, right?
Yeah.
So I found myself like finding the contrast, like where my Western friends would praise me for, you spoke your mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that is something that would not be encouraged from my original culture. You're being disrespectful.
Yes.
And those contradictions, I found them to be like very extreme,
I
like
agree.
almost like the opposite end of each other.
For sure.
And so that was the more I felt like I belonged to the world, whenever I would come home, I would feel like I don't really belong here.
Yeah.
And that was a tough thing to navigate in my teens and early 20s. We'll talk about that when, like, navigating that in your 30s, especially after moving back.
Okay.
But for now, can you please share about your teens and your 20s, or at least in those 7 years?
Yeah. I think I face much of the very same kind of negotiation and, this whole business of figuring out, right, which sounds very easy. But like you, I think, very succinctly put it, you're very much in this sort of in-between place because you've had this upbringing and a certain way of looking at the world, certain way of relating to yourself and other people. And when you go particularly to the US, I think, because I agree with you, they are on the opposite end of the spectrum, and these values kind of show up in all sorts of areas of life, right? From going out with your friends to a restaurant about, over here, maybe people are fighting to pay the bill. Over there, sort of, if you're fighting, you're like losing because your friends never, make that effort from their side, right? Because they don't know and they don't have that at all.
And
right?
then maybe a part of you expects the dance, like, oh no, let me do it, but then no one
says anything. Yeah. I was so confused by that for a really long time, and I was like running through my stipend. So like from stuff like that to, I think, as teenager, like even, I guess, like love and, crush is at the forefront of your like mind. So I agree. Like it was very, very difficult because I think the whole business of crush and trying to, figure out who you like and why, that part of being a teenager is complicated enough, and to have to negotiate cultural differences within that. And we had like some friends from Europe, like female friends, and their sense of showing affection is very similar to how we show affection to our significant other here, not to friends, right? Like,
Oh, okay.
the closeness with which they engage with you, like the first time a girl kissed me, like on my cheek, she meant it like just politely. And I thought like, oh,
Oh, you
she's in
thought,
love
oh,
with
she's in
me,
love with
like,
you.
oh, like we're a thing, like all that. So,
Are we? What are we?
yeah,
What
yeah,
are
yeah. And then realizing that, oh, for them, it's not that way. And then the
we?
heartbreak that came with all of that. And my best friends they have many, many embarrassing stories of us sort of negotiating this very painfully, very hilariously in many circumstances. But in other sense, I think much more deep and fundamental differences, like you said, like speaking your mind, like how much and how this whole business of freedom of thinking, freedom of expression, how all of that is presented and sort of expressed. And like you said, like I felt very, very angry actually at my education system when I was there, because I felt that it had failed very, very, like, hard. It had failed to prepare me to go out and meet the world. Um, so I remember I felt a lot of resentment, even, and the thought that, I was supposedly, because in my system, I did well in our system, and to go out and realizing that, like, oh my God, I'm at the bottom of everything. And then sort of slowly trying to find my way into being able to express my mind, to sort of, yeah, I don't know, start asking all these very deep and sometimes disturbing questions about who you are and what makes you you, and, all that kind of stuff. So, um, I think, but towards the end of my seventh year, like living there, I also started to see the cracks in their sort of way of doing and understanding and dealing with things. So when I came back home after 7 years, I think that really helped me reconcile, because, at the end of my 7 year, that was when Trump was getting elected the first time around. So it was a pretty toxic environment. Black Lives Matter movement was happening like full swing. A black person just got shot like 2 streets from where I was staying at that point in Minnesota, where I was working. So, um, you know, this whole aggressive approach towards freedom of thinking, individuality, I started to see the cracks there. And then that really made me think, so actually, it's not that I should glorify that system as well, because when you fully understand it and, live in it, and, you fully get it, then you also start to see that neither of the two things are perfect, and you start to see the cracks in that system as well. And I think that feeling that political system, social system ideologies are imperfect is, in a way, frustrating, but quite reassuring for me in terms of negotiating how I felt, the kind of resentment and anger I felt at our system. So it helped sort of assuage a lot of that kind of frustration, returning back home. But one other thing I wanted to say was, I think sometimes, like, growing up here, when you're in it and you're so familiar with everything, you don't notice, it's almost like your eyelashes, like it's too close for you to be able to see it. So I think even as a Bhutanese, looking back at this sort of long, frustrating experience, I still would do it all over again, because had I never left, I think a lot of the cracks that I see in our system, a lot of my friends, when I came back and I try to catch up with them, they don't see it, because, they're just living in it, and they don't have, that sort of outside looking in experience, if you know what I mean, So, I don't know. So, I think that part is still, I don't think it'll ever get resolved. But I think there's definitely a way that we can sort of look at it, that's productive, that's also taking a sincere, honest look, and appreciating the kind of things that are good, at the same time soberly sort of fully acknowledging things that are not so good, even with the way we do things over here as well. So I think leaving home really helped me both appreciate the beautiful parts of Bhutan and what it means to be a Bhutanese and our culture here, but also helped me see this not so pretty side of ourselves. Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, like in those 7 years, like for me, the more time I spent abroad, the more I felt like I was floating away from my roots. Like I was so absorbed in the global experiences that I've had, and I can't say they're all American. I've been so privileged. I've lived in multiple countries, and I felt like wherever I went, I tried to adapt to the local, like whether it was India or Thailand or China or the US, like I try to adapt to the local context, but like like also to recognize that you and I did live through globalization. Like when we were growing up, they talked about the world is getting globalized, but now it's globalized. It was globalizing back then, right? So for me, like I can't say I regret that because it was a learning journey, but I did feel that little sense of like losing like the tether, So how did you stay rooted or grounded in those 7 years, or were you also like floating away from, the culture that you grew up in and becoming totally Americanized?
Yeah.
I was totally Americanized.
I know what you mean. It was extremely, I think, disorienting, like you said. Because for all intents and purposes, it's almost as if you've switched universes altogether, And, in physics, they talk about the spiral universes. When you're living through it, it really does feel like that. And I'm very much like you in a sense that, I know a lot of like Bhutanese people who go, say, to Australia, but hang out with other Bhutanese people, eat Bhutanese food, think, and speak Dzongkha, like whatever, right? Like, or their mother tongue. And I guess there's some beauty in that, but I've always leaned towards the other side where I felt like if you have made the effort to go out of your home, like why wouldn't you want to absorb that experience, And for me, I think that's perhaps where you and I differ. I think a little bit is I don't feel that sort of I don't feel badly about it necessarily, if you know what I mean. Like I feel like if I'm in India, I need to sort of immerse myself in that culture, I need to, and even when I was in the US, like I had opportunities to study Buddhist philosophy. Like philosophy is one subject I love. But I thought, hey, I'm probably not going to be here for much longer. But while I'm here, I'm going to immerse myself in Western philosophy. So, I studied everything from the Greeks and the Romans to, the Bible and, the Renaissance, all that kind of stuff. Because, I don't know. And later on, some years ago, I went to London to do my master's. Even then, I think I make a conscious effort to kind of get myself outside of my familiar sort of comfort zone. Yeah. And to really immerse myself, because some deep down part of me believes that, at the end of the day, what's important is that you need to allow yourself to experience as many different, we call exposure, right? Like basically you need to sort of expose yourself quite intentionally, sometimes even when it's uncomfortable. And that I have this deep-seated belief that ultimately that will help you not only appreciate what you already have from when you were growing up and another previous part of your life, but that it also makes you a kinder, more compassionate, more person that's able to deal with many kinds of different kinds of people. Because even right now, like when I interact with people, one thing that really saddens me is when someone is only able to do, see, and say things in just one sort of particular way. They're not able to accommodate differences. Growing up, like I never met my grandmother, but one story that my mom always used to tell me about my grandmother is that she was that type of person that could, be as close with someone like a, like a old grandfather. They would just come by to stay the night at her place, to, sort of high-ranking officials, and even growing up, I didn't have a good reason, but I loved that quality, and I still love that quality in people, that ability to have this sort of accommodating nature.
Being agreeable.
Sort of having your sense of beliefs, principles, whatever it might be, but never to a point that there's no room for someone else to kind of come into that space, and I think that sort of only comes if you're able to fundamentally accept that the world is a very, very big place, and that there are lots of different kinds of people that feel, experience, and they've had their own sort of contexts and life experiences that have shaped them very, very differently from how you know the world. So this whole phenomenon of sort of being third culture kids, when you're in it, I think it's very disorienting in many ways. There's also very like humorous, beautiful parts of it, as I'm sure you know. But ultimately, I think I'm still of the belief that like if I had to do it all over again and I got to choose it, I would still, like, without a missing a heartbeat, I'll still do the whole thing all over again.
There were so many nuggets of wisdom in there. I'm like, which one to follow up on? I think your general attitude towards life is the growth mindset, and the heart of the growth mindset is coming out of your comfort zone. The more experiences you have, the more you're given the opportunity to figure out, I'm vibing with this, I'm not vibing with this. I like this, I could be really good at this. This, I could master this. This one and done, right? So the more you know that, the more you can understand, this is my strength, this is a limitation. So I deeply appreciate your outlook. And you shared that, like, maybe mine is a little bit like, that I was like fading away. I mean, I'm totally on board with you as well, in terms of, if you go abroad, you need to immerse in the full experience. Like, we're exactly the same there. I think that this perspective of like, I want to be so rooted here is actually a projection of this insecurity, of feeling like I'm not good enough to be Bhutanese. And that has been reinforced for me in how I received the way that I engage with people here and there. And I think in some ways, even right now, I'm still in this pursuit of trying to feel like I'm good enough to be Bhutanese. I belong
that
here
you belong,
too. Just because I can speak decent English doesn't mean that I'm any less Bhutanese than you, sir, whose Dzongkha is excellent. And I'm finally in the stage in my life where I feel like, no, even I can contribute to my country. Even I am a part of this society. No matter like what kind of thoughts you have on me, because I come off as being so globalized or westernized in some ways. So I guess this is a good segue into our next part of the conversation.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
On that particular point?
Yeah.
I was just, as you were talking, I was just reflecting. During our parents' time, it's like sort of being globalized or getting this exposure was always talked about in the positive terms, right?
Man.
But I feel like where people like you and I have faced that kind of crisis is because for them, and this is just my theory, by the way, I don't know if it's true, but during their time of going abroad and getting this perspective, I think they also had a very good, I don't know whether to call it a job market or whatever, but like they had a very good reason to come back. In fact, the reason why they went out in the first place is to come
get
back
the
and to
skills.
contribute.
Yes.
And if you look at the builders of Bhutan, like modern Bhutan, a lot of people have that kind of, they were able to sort of absorb and then bring it here, right? Whereas for, I think, us, the world kind of shifted in a sense that it got a lot more interconnected, and now I would say it's hyper connected, right? Like you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
This whole thing about being Bhutanese, right? I was, you and I talked about this, I think, previously as well, and that really got me thinking. What is it? Forget identity for a second. With anything in life, like, what is it about? What characteristic, like, sort of gives you that right to say that that thing belongs to you, or you belong to that thing?
Mm.
And for me, like, even you and I both love dogs. Like, the reason why we're able to say, oh, hey, this is my dog, I feel like largely comes from loving that thing. Whether it's animal, whether it's and for me, the point I'm trying to make is, even with the sense of being Bhutanese and home, I I know a lot of people disagree with me on this, but I'm of the belief that it's how much you love your particular home, country, whatever.
Mm.
And for me, like, beyond any other characteristics, that's the singular defining quality. Not necessarily the language you speak, the go and care. Of course, these are very important external sort of expressions of what we
Symbols.
call
They're
symbols, like
visual
identities.
symbols,
Yeah. But deep down inside, these, I think, visual outer sort of characteristics of identities, um, like, I feel like it stands on a very sort of fragile house of cards. Like, it's very easy to kind of poke holes into that kind of argument. Because say, for instance, if it's something like your ability, you brought up, right, like your ability to speak Dzongkha. But when we look at our country, there are a lot of Bhutanese who don't necessarily speak perfect Dzongkha, but they're Bhutanese. So for me, I feel like those kinds of arguments, it always falls short of our lived reality, because we know from our experience that that's not true. But for me, it's really, love is what sort of fills that sense of, belongingness, that sense of, in this case, identity. So for me, I know, like, my love for my country, and that's I think helped me a lot in terms of sort of negotiating that as well, because very much like when I was away from home, I definitely felt uprooted, and oh my god, will I, like a kite that's strings just been cut, will I just suddenly settle in the US and marry an American citizen, and have American, like, half American kids? And these are very real possibilities when you're there, right? So but for me, I think thinking about belongingness through this sort of lens has really helped me find that sense of security and that sense of confidence, that I belong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the reason why I invited you here. Because you're much younger than me, and I'm like, how he have that way of thinking, huh? how he get there? Because like, I agree with everything you said, but I only got here like now, I've only gotten here in the last couple of years, and it's been a long and difficult journey, man, coming here. So like, this segues really well into our second topic of conversation for today, which is coming back home to yourself, to your roots, and knowing the place again for the first time, right? You, in our previous conversation, you shared that, see, now you said, what happened that, like, you don't have an American wife and kids right now, and you're not settled in Minnesota. I think a lot of people who, once you go abroad, those thoughts are there. Because it will be easier to get jobs outside. You will make more money. It will be more stable in that sense. So it's that question of, why did you come back? And what brought you back here? And one of the reasons you shared in our previous conversations is the lack of kindness that you sometimes experienced helped get you on that road to the road home.
I don't have any grand reason, to be perfectly honest. I just hated it there towards the end.
Oh man.
Yeah. I mean, I told you, right? The
Yeah. Yeah.
political climate was.
Yeah.
I have a degree in political science. Studied, as hard as I could, try to understand all of the different sort of, setups of how society works and how governments can be, all that. But, when Trump's first election into office, it almost, I could have wiped all of my, political science notes and threw them out of the window, because when it came to this guy, like nothing applied. So that was one.
Mm.
The second one was this progressive, gradual experience of racism. I know that word gets thrown around quite a lot, but when you're the one on the experiencing side or receiving side of that, and for me, it wasn't really overt acts of racism, like no one called me a chink, like that kind of stuff, but it's this feeling you have in your gut, and that they're treating you somehow differently, and
Yeah.
I always felt that so acutely. How do you say
Yeah.
it?
Acutely.
Acutely, that that they're not seeing you as a whole person.
Yeah. Yes.
And in US, I think US is one country that's particularly plagued with this kind of narrow way of labeling, boxing, and then figuring a way to deal with it.
It's so interesting. It's become like that.
Yeah.
The
So
nation of immigrants, right?
yeah, exactly. So when I was there, like for instance, when I was growing up, I never questioned my maleness, But over there, and I'm sure you're familiar, like Asian men are sort of, what do you call that? Like Asian women are like hypersexualized, but as Asian men,
You're desexualized.
yeah, your manhood is almost sort of, you're not a man type of like
Yeah.
ideas.
Stereotypes.
Yeah. And whenever I interacted with people, I could see that they were looking at me through this lens. And, some deep down part of me just wished I could, I don't know, it's such a difficult thing to have to deal with. And so that was the other thing. The third thing was just the rampant capitalism there. I know that's an ideology, but when you actually live it, you see how people's entire lives are dictated by work. And more importantly, when I used to go over to my friend's house for like Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, whatever, right? Like seeing them treat their grandparents, who are no longer contributing members of society in an economic sense, and how like the way that they would like treat them, speak to them, it was really heartbreaking for me. And I think some deep down part of me always wished, don't they wonder, don't they know that they're going to get there one day? Like that's an inevitability, like all of us will become old. Like, and don't they wonder, like what kind of system they're setting up,
Yeah.
So that part, I think was extremely like, in Gen Z speak, the ick. Like that was the biggest ick for me, like, I don't know. And so I think all of these factors just sort of, got too much, and I was starting to lose my sense of self. And,
Yeah.
When you're put into, I think we spoke about this, crabs like in a bucket.
Crabs in a barrel.
Yeah, like this whole crabs in a barrel mentality, where things over there are so competitive that everything is converted into economic terms, that there's no space whatsoever for things like compassion to even
GDP world.
yeah, entirely. Like things like compassion, kindness, like there's no space for that to even sort of peek through, like let alone have the space to actually do it. Like people don't even have that mental capacity to so for me, I think that was the
Yeah.
deal breaker. And I knew that, hey, like, why would I put up with all of this? Like, I have a home, I have, my family there. I thought I had my friends, but then I realized that they had also changed so much, and I actually had to make new friends once I came back. And that was another whole part of, adjusting to coming back. So for me, I think, I remember just like being here and suddenly, I think particularly in the United States, they live a lot in this isms. racism, sexism, this, like
The identity
ageism.
politics.
Yeah,
Is that the word?
the politics is, yeah. I think the identity politics is very toxic. And when I came home, I remember just feeling like this huge weight of ism has just been lifted off my shoulder, and I don't know, just being able to sort of breathe again. And when you interact with people sort of acknowledging you as a full human being, which I felt denied.
I don't know that people would over here also. I don't know if like sometimes we see the fullness
I know
of
what you mean.
yeah,
I know what you mean.
but
Yeah.
it's so interesting how many parallels there are in our experiences. Like that was also like for me as well, like I think being Bhutanese, being a developing country, and this is not just you and me, this is our culture. And I think it's the culture of every developing country where you assume that donor countries or developed countries, they have it all sorted out. And we aspire to that, right? So sometimes there's an assumption in there that's made that we must copy everything.
Yes.
But it shouldn't be that way. It should be a negotiation. And that's what I finally realized when, even in my experiences, I started to see the cracks in my experience with the American dream.
Or the opposite, right? Sometimes, like, I have, in my sort of past working life experience, there's certain like leaders in Bhutan that believe we are a completely unique case. We should take nothing from the rest of the world, which I think is just as inadequate and just as narrow as copying everything. But I agree with you. Like, there's definitely a negotiation there in somewhere in between where, and I think that's where the sort of real work that all of us need to do really is. Yeah.
I was told to go back home. Like that was one of my experiences. Like I was told to go back home by a homeless guy. And he's like, go back to where you came from. I was like, where do you think I came from? He said, from the Orient. So
wow.
And the realization that I had was, why am I trying so hard to live in a country that clearly doesn't want me? So this was like 2016, 17, actually 2014. So that was when Donald Trump came down the golden escalator. And then, his rise from there. So I really did start to see that shift in experiencing like full on blatant racism like that. And so then the thought I had was, why am I trying so hard to be here? Like, I'm so privileged. I'm not a refugee. I'm not an asylum seeker. I have a choice. I have a home to go back to. And so that experience. So now for both of us, it was a little bit like this gradual disillusionment with our experiences of individualism and capitalism at that level, that we're like, I want to see what this is about at home. Because I know that even if we have so many issues, like we always treat people decently when they're a guest, and then like as international students, like we help to fund your economy. But then it became this kind of situation where if you're not Caucasian, basically, right? So forget like green card holders and everyone. But anyways, that's going off on a tangent. Coming back here, I was very intrigued that being the kind of person you are, having the kind of background you have, I was like, this Rigsar has become very religious. It's like, he's got these religious gangs that he rolls with.
It's true.
And I'm like, I can understand like what I call myself, which is spiritual, which is like, I'm still reading things in English about Buddhism, and I still am like a chilip where it has to be presented to me like in a really like broken down, it has
Yeah.
to be simplified
Yeah.
so much for me to
Yeah.
understand the concepts. So I was like, how come this guy is so religious? How come he got accepted into all these groups and all that? So
Yeah.
just like from the outside
Mm.
looking in, no context,
Mm.
totally curious.
Mm.
So can you speak a little bit about your journey to spirituality or Buddhism?
You know, in first of all, I want to say I'm exactly like you. And that's part of, we can't lie to ourselves, right? Like, I lived a productive part of my life studying, learning how to do independent thinking in English. That's just the truth. For me, I discovered Dharma, Buddha Dharma, through English. I don't have any hang-ups about it, because if anyone tried to tell me, that you have to speak or understand, Tibetan to understand a Buddha Dharma, then I would say Buddha wasn't Tibetan. Guru Rinpoche wasn't Tibetan. So all of these masters that we revere aren't. And kind of going back to, what we were talking earlier about this outer casing of things, right? Yeah. So, Buddha wasn't Tibetan. Um, probably taught in Pali, right? And, Lord knows what sort of language Guru Rinpoche spoke. So for me, I think, and that's where I see the value of history and understanding history, and going back to what we're saying, this ability to think, immerse, sort of uproot your way of thinking from what you're comfortable and familiar and what you understand, to try and put yourself into the shoes of a completely different time and place, and when you, I think, do that enough, then I feel like you don't get hang-ups about, this sort of outer
The
casing, right?
technicalities,
Yeah. I remember once one of my teachers, spiritual teachers, Guru, he said, about this religion and culture business, it's very much like drinking tea. So like this cup, if we think about all the different kinds of cups there are in the world, it's, so many, right? There's made out of clay in a place where there's probably clay abundantly available. If it comes from China, it's got a specifically like Chinese porcelain kind of vibe to it, so on and so forth. But he said, as you learn to understand Buddha Dharma, try to see it in a way where, what you're trying to do is, the ultimate point of the Buddha Dharma is not, I mean, the cups might be beautiful, but ultimately you want to be able to drink the tea inside. Now, the irony is, because of the laws of the universe, the tea can't just sort of float in space. So that's where the cup comes in, right? We need a container to hold it. But ultimately, the goal is not for us to eat the cup, but actually to drink the tea that's inside. So that really helped me understand how I look at this entire world of Buddha Dharma. And, sort of going back to our experiences, upbringings, right? Like very typical public school upbringing that I had. You're forced to do morning, prayers, Jemyang Seldep, prayers to Manjushri, evening prayers, to a point where I remember, like, I was just in grade, 7, 6. I could, recite like 150 pages of our evening prayer book, But as soon as I left that, I completely forgot it. Because no one ever explained why I was doing what I was doing. Just that, it was more important that I could do it. So this journey back into not only home, but actually journey back into Buddhism or Buddha Dharma was sort of rediscovering Buddha Dharma and trying to sort of drink from that cup and, not be focused on the cup, which in this case might be the script that's on a page, right? So I am of the belief that it doesn't matter whether it's written in Tibetan or English, like whatever language you can understand, whatever cup you can use to be able to drink the tea, and the tea in this case, as I understand it, is these timeless wisdom, that can help answer not only questions about a sense of identity, purpose, meaning, but actually, provide us that space to practice compassion. How do you grow it? How do you encourage it? How do you become a type of person that, is kind-hearted, is able to accommodate these different worldviews? So, even though sort of I'm rolling with the religious crowd. My journey towards the Buddha Dharma actually is very much mediated, you could say, from a Western-centric perspective.
Yes.
But
yeah.
like I said again, I feel like one of this wisdom of Buddha Dharma is that, throughout culture, it always changes. It always shifts,
Culture
it always takes on
changes,
these
yeah.
different shapes and tones and colors. But as long as you're able to sort of get at the heart of what it is that's trying to teach you, I feel like if you can get that, or if you're attempting to get that, I feel like that's a noble, worthy cause. And for me, there's no other, that's what makes it all worth it. Even things that seemed silly in the past, like, offering choba. I did it like very robotically in the past, but now, now that I'm trying to sort of discover a bit more about why, like just sort of stopping yourself and asking, why am I doing this, and sort of gradually finding our own answers to that kind of question, and to sort of try to, and once you get a taste for the tea, I think then, it's quite addictive in a sense, because it, I think the Buddha Dharma teaches truths that were true during Buddha's time, like 2,500 years ago. And these are very simple truths, right?
Yes.
About impermanence, about interdependence. And, fast forward 2,500 years later, none of these truths have changed. And one thing that I really love, because I would say, a very critical person, I don't accept things readily. I like really feel like I need to understand it, and to actually absorb it, to
You're
accept
an
it.
intentional person.
Yeah, I mean, I try to be, at least.
You don't do something for the sake of doing
No,
something.
one big sort of I think attraction for me was everything in the Buddha Dharma is subject to questioning, which was amazing for a philosophy nerd like me.
So isn't that ironic that sometimes you're not allowed to question that? Here, the Buddha Dharma, like the Buddha said, don't like question everything.
Yes.
But then you're not allowed to question, why do I have to do the chip? Why do I have to do this many chas? I don't even know what these scriptures mean.
Yeah.
And then I'm curious about your individualistic approach to the Dharma.
Yeah.
So how did you negotiate your individuality and this individualistic approach you bring in this collective kind of practice?
Yeah.
I've had some conversations before where I said, oh, as a newbie, as a total noob, at the level that I am, I don't know about this concept of God, but I'm understanding that the Buddha was one of the greatest teachers, I think. So I'm trying to understand what his teachings were about. And I was told that it was wrong to think that, like, no, Buddha is a god, Rinpoche is a god. So it was not enough. But for me, it was more progress than all the prayers I ever recited, that I was forced to recite as a child. So have you been challenged for your individualistic approach? And how do you approach it? Because you talked about the cup being the container, but the main thing is about the tea. So there's also a parallel there with the symbols, like speaking Dzongkha, or wearing Gokira all the time. This is the container to show that you're a Bhutanese, but then we shouldn't get stuck there, because it's about the tea. It's about the character of what makes you a Bhutanese, right? So did you experience anything like that, and how did you navigate?
Absolutely, I think. It's because, much like everything else that exists in the world, I think, like, what I really like about Buddha Dharma is, ultimately, from what I understand it as of now, it's about transforming your mind. And, I don't, for me, I think the part of myself that's sort of critical, for me, arguments about you do it because you do it, it never works. So if my goal ultimately is to transform my mind, I know that that's not the path for me. So even as I practice and understand Buddha Dharma at my current, I would say, very much a beginner's level, I still have this deep down sort of belief that, actually Buddha Dharma is ultimately, if it's done right, it's supposed to lead to a transformation of your mind. And for me, a lot of these sort of rituals, all these things helped me sort of negotiate that, because while we talk about drinking the tea, in this case, in the way that I understand it, it's being able to get in touch with your mind. We're not able to do it, because we're emotional creatures, right? We need, I love, flowers, and, when the flower is in a space, it makes you happy. And there's no way to sort of reason your way around it. It's just an emotional reaction that we tend to have towards things that we see as beautiful and all of that kind of stuff, right? So, even like offering choba and all of that kind of stuff, for me, I think when I've sort of interpreted the Buddha Dharma as all of these methods and ways to be able to get in touch with your mind, and right now in Bhutan, mindfulness is big, right? And it's almost become a buzzword, and the danger is that we throw that around so much without really trying to understand what it is. But it's so for me, I think when I've sort of interpreted the Buddha Dharma through that lens of, it's all of these are ways of you getting in touch with, this innate nature of your own mind. And these are very high sounding language that I fully don't understand what it means. But, you get glimpses of it, I think. And, so right now, like all of these practices, it's not that I see them as useless, like offering kami, but it's doing it and then keenly sort of being aware of what it does to your mind. So when I've been able to, like, when I do that, I see, like, particularly having lived in the US where everything is transactional, and unfortunately in Bhutan and Thimphu particularly, things are getting transactional now, there's no way around it. That's one area of life in the morning that you do first thing, where, I mean, you might be a certain type of practitioner where you expect something in return, like more wealth, good health, all that, which is fine, because I guess that's good. But I feel like, even the fact that we offer water, it's one act that you do without necessarily, there's no transactionality in it, in the way that I practice, or I try to practice it at least, and create that kind of space that allows you to practice, the acts of selflessness. And even say, offering like tsok, for instance, like, I cook something, but before I eat it, like just offering it to this higher being. Whether there is a higher being or not, I don't know, by the way. Like I said, like,
it's a practice of humility.
But I think, like even prostrating, like,
and surrender.
it really, these are, I think, skillful ways. And that's why Buddha was such an amazing teacher, right? Is that he had this, in Buddha Dharma, they always talk about this interplay and this interconnected nature of compassion and wisdom. Wisdom is knowing what to do, right? Compassion is knowing how to do it in a way that it works.
Okay.
So for me, I think all of these, if you don't think about it, seemingly arbitrary rituals, things that you do, when you're really able to look at what it does to your mind, I think a lot of it starts making a lot of sense, because I think Buddha was an amazing teacher in that sense that, he knew and he understood, I think, human psychology so deeply that sometimes, like, things that don't necessarily make logical sense make emotional, and, it just makes sense, like it's like falling in love, like you don't have good reasons, but like the whole, you can kind of feel it in your entire being, and I feel like ever since I've sort of looked at Buddha Dharma that way, through this lens of like mindfulness, or this sort of getting in touch with this nature of mind, that the great masters tell us is innately, radiant and compassionate and all-encompassing, all that kind of stuff. So that's really helped me negotiate a lot of these practices. So even when someone is doing it, and not necessarily, like, even if someone is offering something transactionally, my aunt does that a lot, by the way. Like, on the first day of the Global Peace Prayer, she was like, Tshering. And she was like, oh, and she was like using my grandfather's name and like, oh, this grandfather's family, let none of us like be sick, and may we always prosper. And I don't know, like that still fits because like in her mind, the sense of like humility and the sense of
It's still there.
yeah,
It's still there.
this containing of the ego, right? Because in the US, both of us have seen what happens
Unchecked.
when that ego is unchecked, right? And you get like complete like clown leaders like Donald Trump. And when you look at the kind of stuff that he says, sometimes you wonder, how can a person be that way and speak and think like that? And I think like when you really reflect, that's what happens when the ego is unchecked, right? It just grows, and like there's no sense of impermanence. People think that they're never gonna die or get old, and that no matter how much wealth and power or whatever else they might have, that one day it's just all going to go away.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question about the transactional nature. Like like clearly that's a big thing for you personally, and it matters for me as well a lot. Like the way you're moved and the way you're given that opportunity to realize that you can live a more elevated life when you leave the transactional nature of how you engage with people on the daily behind. And it's so beautiful and it's so touching. So a lot of the critics of like, I'm very critical, and I have to say, like, I can see my own ego in here as well. I can see how I don't know enough, and it's easier to judge and dismiss. I'll give you an example. Like the Catholic Church now, there's so many like cases of child abuse, pedophilia, that it's like it's almost like associated like with the church. Like if you're a pedophile, then that's a great job to pursue, to become a priest within the church. And it's very unfortunate, and it's very critical, that the whole faith, or maybe the faith has a reckoning, both could be true. These days I've learned of like a practice in an Islamic country that I don't think it's in all Islamic countries, but it was very disturbing. It was very sick actually. And I'm finding like my mind, it's so quick to be so ready to dismiss the entire religion of Islam that I know nothing about. I know nothing about Islam. So I can see that tendency in me. And I've had that, not tendency, I've done it here before, where I've thought like, oh, you want to make merit on the important religious days because your merit will be like
Multiplied.
multiplied. Or you're not eating meat today because of that, but then you eat meat on regular days. Now, I've had my friends say like, my mom will give lakhs and lakhs to Rimdro, but she won't even give a few clothes to like the poor neighbors' children who she sees every day that they don't have proper clothes to wear. Like, he was very critical, and he said that, and even I found it so brutal, but basically like these comments like this, that actually it is totally transactional. And so many of the people who follow it, like, they're not thinking for themselves. They don't understand. They're just being sheep. So when people criticize the Dharma like that, what is your response to that as a practitioner now? Especially as somebody who's very intentional and tries to really understand the teachings of the Dharma.
I'm riddled with contradiction and hypocrisy. I just need to put it out there.
Yes, as am I. Me too, you guys. Huge hypocrite over here.
But, for me, that's precisely where the value of Buddha Dharma is. One of my gurus say, the Buddha Dharma is perfect. The practitioners are not. And I think that's sort of, when you have that kind of spiritual teacher, they have a way of saying so many things in just 2 lines, and for me, I think that's what really, because I used to have that kind of arguments, because I used to see my neighbors, and then they would just kick a dog in front of me, and as a huge dog lover, like, that's extremely disturbing. that they're saying money jashing in one hand, and
May
then
all beings be liberated.
right,
May all beings be free from suffering. Yeah.
exactly. And so for me, for the longest time, and I've heard this arguments from like my family members as well, like that, I feel like those that practice Buddha Dharma are actually some of the cruelest people. And I think that observation is not wrong, but I think how we can work through this sort of knotted problem is that learning to separate the teaching from the practitioner, and to realize that I think the value of Buddhism or Buddha Dharma is precisely, in the fact that we are imperfect, and, not to get too philosophical, but even looking at something like love or compassion, the very fact that we're able to understand what it means is made only possible because of its opposite. If there was no selfishness, we won't know what selflessness is necessarily. And so
I hear you.
I think, and that's why for me Buddha Dharma is so relevant, is because it's because of the fact that we're extremely, egotistical, like the daily experience of life really sort of challenges us, like even driving a car, right? Like you can feel the kind of rush of emotions about
Road
a person,
rage.
not going like fast enough, like all these kinds of stuff. And when you, I think, learn to have a bit of appreciation for the Buddha Dharma, it sort of almost helps you buffer a little bit, because it helps you ask, wait a minute, why did I just feel that way? And sometimes I think that few microseconds is enough. And from what I understand it, mindfulness is nothing but that pause, in a turbulent situation, not being caught up in that, and to actually have this almost objective standpoint where you're able to step outside of your own mind, and to actually ask yourself, wait, why did I do that? And that pause actually gives you, it makes a world of a difference. It's the difference between giving into your road rage, I don't know, crashing your car, flipping someone off.
Yep.
And, at the end of the day, you just end up becoming such a bitter, angry, frustrated person yourself. And, and that little pause, I think, really makes a world of a difference. So, to answer your question, I think the practitioners are imperfect, but it's not something to sort of look down on. That's actually precisely why Buddha Dharma exists, and
so for you, what is the difference between Dharma and culture? Because we're a country where they're kind of intertwined.
Very much.
No?
Very much.
Yeah,
very
like
much.
even our architecture, you can see how much influence there is from Buddhism and like Dharma teaching. So, but you're saying the teachings are perfect, the practitioners are imperfect, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But so you're saying one is Dharma and one is culture.
Kind
so
of,
what is the difference then in a land where, in a country where it's actually seen as one?
For me, I think that deeply intertwined nature of Dharma and culture actually initially turned me away from Buddhism altogether, because I wasn't able to differentiate the two, and growing up, I think arguments about, you do, like my aunt used to say, like, go water the flowers. Like, I want to play, right? Like, go water the flower. Why must I do it? And she'll be like, if you do it in the next life, you'll be reborn, like, as a handsome, beautiful guy and girl. And for me, those kinds of arguments never satisfied me. I don't really have a great answer, because I think, but what I will say is, I think for me, that intertwined nature was really, really problematic in the beginning, because a lot of it felt forced down my throat, with no one to actually properly explain and, like, let me experience this wisdom that's in Buddha Dharma, right? But that's been a journey that I've had to kind of go out and sort of look for it myself. I don't think there's, unfortunately, a neat sort of line dividing the two. Of course, the great masters sort of tell us that ultimately, if you're able to get the Dharma, there is no difference between the culture and the Dharma, because once your mind is transformed and you're able to look at the world through this lens of interdependence, compassion, the other things like culture and all, they just kind of
Yeah.
fall out of the
Yeah.
picture because they're more important,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is one way, like one reason why I really like the Dharma, like as a mental health advocate.
Yeah.
Speaking in a mental health podcast, I
Yeah.
think like this is one of the biggest connections between the Dharma and mental health is that in individual responsibility and ownership
Yeah.
that you have to take for your own in the mental health part, your mental health, your
Yeah.
journey, whatever, and then in the spiritual part, like maybe I don't know, your salvation, like where I don't know, the kind of life you want to live, or maybe you want to transcend this life. Who
Yeah.
knows, right?
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
a lot of like overlap there between the
Absolutely.
two. I
Yeah.
really liked in our previous conversation you talked about spiritual materialism and how that is an example of how culture hijacks or takes over the Dharma. So I feel like that could be a good, like, kind of, you have to have that foundation of mindfulness,
Yeah.
that self-awareness to like check in with yourself. Okay, I have been like, trying to study the teachings of the Dharma for this long, but am I just accumulating
Yeah.
knowledge and maybe like, I don't know, like symbols of the Dharma, like
Yes.
but you're still consuming.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
consuming the practices. I'm consuming the I don't know, the things that are used, like spiritual materialism.
Yes.
Could you
Yes.
speak a little bit on that and then move on to our final topic?
For me, I came across this concept of spiritual materialism through Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. He was a great master who taught actually in English and has written so many books and basically tried to disseminate Buddha Dharma to a Western audience, which was perfect for me, and I think would
As a
be for you
Western
too.
audience.
Yeah, like sort of having spent that formative years, and like things just kind of make sense much faster, much easier. So in sort of cutting through spiritual materialism, he kind of talked, and for me, I think a lot of unease I felt at the mix of culture and Buddha Dharma here was cleared away with this one singular concept of spiritual materialism, and I could see even among my friends, even within myself, is this really true Dharma in a sense that does it help to understand my mind better? You're focused on the outer expressions of what you think Buddha Dharma means to you. Whereas, what I think, as I understand it, is, even in our own local language, we say we're Nangpa, right? Like we're Nangpa Gichu, which means we're almost insiders, like we're people that look inside. And for me, when I made that connection between spiritual materialism, mind, and how all of this culture, this practices are just really skillful ways of letting you experience that, getting in touch with your mind. Like that really helped me reconcile so many things. And for me, I remember like Guru Rinpoche, right? Like we see statues of him everywhere. We have so many pilgrimage sites that we go and visit. And before, I had this very sort of superficial idea of him just as sort of like this godly figure, not much different from theistic religions, but I remember like in one of his teachings, he said, try not to study phenomenon, try to understand the nature of mind, because once you understand the nature of mind, that's the one thing that will resolve all. If you're, lost in studying phenomena, you'll understand and accumulate so much knowledge, but you'll miss that one thing that'll help you condense, bring it all together. So for me, I don't know, when I read it, and even when I'm talking about it right now, like I can kind of feel my like goosebumps like
Yes.
coming up, because for me, like it was like, it just clicked. Everything just clicked at that point. And I was like, yes, and that's to be able to condense everything into this one essential, way of looking and understanding reality that helps you reconcile everything. And now, when my aunt does whatever practices, before I used to think it's silly, by the way, like the rimros to, like blah, blah, blah. But now, I don't know, like understanding Buddha Dharma through that lens has almost helped me understand, these are much like other skillful ways. These are ways of
Yeah.
actually getting in touch with the thing that really matters. And as silly as they may look, this materialistic side of spirituality, it's still important, because after all, at the end of the day, we're embodied being, right? We have a body that's physical, and we need to see, hear, taste. All of these ways are methods through which we get in touch with our mind,
Mm-hmm.
and these are the vehicles through which we do it. So yeah, that's been really helpful for me.
Thank you. I have so many follow-up questions, but we have to be really mindful of time. So let's quickly thank you so much for sharing that. I'll have follow-up questions for you after this episode. But I wanted to, our final topic that we wanted to explore for tonight, for Masterpeace followers, there's like this little inside joke where I always say, like, I'm looking for a man to come on the podcast to talk about men's mental health, because it's something that I really care about. And I really care about it because I can feel the divide. I can see the growing divide. Talking about the US again, we are even in that place now in this time in the world where in the US, like women, females are even there's a political divide. Females are voting left. And males are voting right. Like they're saying, bring back the trad wife, and like, what are you going to do? Take away girls' education? There are still so many places in the world where girls don't get educated, but like largely, like, we're not going back now. Right? So you talked about how, like, the stereotypes in the US where like as an Asian male, like it's so like dehumanizing, the way that people look at you and think about you. And you talked about road rage, our ego, like our ever inflated sense of self. So I feel that I'm not saying women don't suffer from ego and narcissism and things like that. Absolutely. But I think males do to a much higher extent. So one thing I feel concerned for as a liberated female, as an educated female, as somebody who deeply values the rights that I have to have my own mind, to speak my own mind, to have agency in the kind of life that I build for myself, knowing that it was built on the backs of the sacrifices of a lot of the women who came before me, who never had the kind of life that I do, which is a total life of privilege and freedom and agency and it's just you can't be wanting for more. So one concern I feel as that kind of a person is when I see that males are having less and less positive role models in the world today. I think females are having more and more positive role models for them, but for males I feel like it's getting worse. And I see that by how many young Bhutanese teenage boys and even like younger than teenagers that I've met who like unchecked phone time, parents don't know what they're doing on social media. Andrew Tate comes up a lot, and that really scares me. So I want to invite you to speak a little bit about your masculinity. Like, how do you show up as a male in this world? Like, how do you be like a positive and a healthy, like, what is healthy masculinity to you? How do you practice it? How do you model it for like, your younger nephews, nieces, for Dodi, who I see on Instagram, who's Chimi's nephew, right? So if you could speak to that a little.
I think this whole thing of masculinity, femininity, sexuality in general, that's also sort of in huge flux right now, right? Much like other parts of our identity, because the world's sort of becoming, I guess, more and more sophisticated, complicated, whatever you want to call it. And now even this idea of what it means to be a man is being challenged, because for better, I would say for the worse, I would happily call myself a feminist. But in sort of days of patriarchy, things were the lines were quite clear, right? This is what makes you a man. You do this, you wear this, blah 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 blah. And it's this whole sort of list of labels that you have to kind of learn and perform, which made you a man, or sort of same for women, right? But now, of course, with a lot of sort of not only the kind of progress that's been made in the LGBTIQ movement, which is really challenging this idea of this strictly defined sexuality, right? So for me, I see this whole movement, outside of this sort of strict patriarchal gender sort of division, as something that's healthy, because I think that's much closer to the truth from the way that I've experienced life. Just to sort of talk about my own sort of upbringing, actually, I don't think I had like a positive male role model. Even growing up, my parents got separated, and even when they were together, growing up as a kid, I definitely experienced like a dysfunctional relationship in my parents, and the sort of subsequent confusion. And I think even my sort of biological father, he was unfortunately a victim of sort of that kind of patriarchy. And earlier you talked about sort of mental health, and for I think men in that kind of system, and that sort of patriarchal system, I think still exists, because things like that don't just go away quickly. Is one of the criteria is that you have to be strong, physically, emotionally, all that kind of stuff.
That's the only option.
Yeah, and you're not like allowed to sort of show your emotions, right? Like, because that's
weak.
feminine somehow, or weak. Yeah. So I think what ends up happening to a lot of men, and I'm sure I've internalized some of this myself, by the way, is that we learn to sort of hide, particularly the sort of painful experiences of life. And because human beings are human beings, it has to find an outlet somewhere. And unfortunately, I think a lot of it comes out as violence, particularly in men, because that's one way of expressing your emotion that's somehow socially acceptable, or believed to be expected of you as a man.
Yeah.
But I mean, just I think like, even when we go around at bars, like, you see all these older men just sort of drinking their life away, and you wonder, like, why. And for me, I feel like these are sort of the hidden symptoms of men's sort of mental health, or the state of men's mental health. So for me, I think I had sort of the painful experiences that come from sort of living in a dysfunctional household. But for me, I like this appreciation and the love that I have for my mother is because I think she, even though I was very young, she tried to sort of shield me from that experience as much as she could. And like, looking back, even then, I could feel it, that she was trying to protect me. But she was always very open with me in terms of what was happening. Like, even when it got to a point where my mom and dad had to sort of separate because my dad was abusing her like so much, she like came to me and asked me, if that was okay. And she didn't have to do that, by the way, but I think that was like so emotionally intelligent for her, like of her, to do that. And for me, I think I remember even then I understood the gravity of what that meant, that question. And back then as well, I didn't want my mom to sort of suffer. So I told her, like, oh yes, you should separate, because it's not good for either of you, especially for you. And then sort of growing up mostly in with my mom and with my aunt, and my uncle was also heavily, he used to drink a lot. And I think a lot of it, again, kind of comes back to sort of this kind of system that we've set up, right, where men are not allowed to talk about and be openly emotional and all that kind of stuff. So for me, I think sort of tying it a little bit with Buddha Dharma again, like, and this importance of mind and your perspective and how you look at reality. So for me, all the things that I saw, and all the stereotypes that existed back then about how kids of divorced parents become like drug addicts and gets into gangs and fights and all of stuff. Like, I remember even growing up back then, I think because of that kind of respect that my mom and the openness that she showed towards me, even though I would say I didn't deserve it, being as young as I was. Like, I remember feeling, as I was growing up without that kind of male role model, that I always told myself, like, I know what not to do as as a man. Like, the lessons that I got in my life is not like, oh, this is how you should treat other people, and this is how you treat your partner, and like, kids and whatever. But I think a lot of the lessons I had to sort of take a bit more active role in sort of actively resisting these kinds of behavior, because I could see very visibly the kind of pain that was causing not only my mother but also myself. And I think to learn to sort of have that compassion for yourself enough, because I think with a lot of these kinds of situations, people just end up enacting what they see, right? And it's a very well studied phenomenon in psychology, right? Like, victims end up becoming the abuser like much later on.
Yes, the cycle.
Yeah. So for me, I think it was really quite simple. Like, and like, looking back, I mean, of course, this was a painful part of my life, but like I said, again, like, I had much happier times mixed in with all of that. So I remember when I was growing up, and my uncles, older brothers, those that like, these times that they treated me with such like tenderness. I remember this one particular incident where I went to Tshering, one of my aunts from there, to help build a house. I don't know why I was interested, but I was there somehow, and I remember that was my decision. And one night, I was just like sleeping, and there's this older brother that lived there, and like, he just sort of gently like tucked the blanket underneath me, and that was the first time I experienced it. And I remember that experience so like vividly even now, and the kind of care and tenderness that he as a man sort of showed, and how much that impacts you as a person, and when you really experience that kind of love and tenderness and that kindness, you understand why it's so valuable, and how worth it is for you to try to embody that and kind of pass it on. So right now, yeah, with my nephew and nieces, I think looking back to my own childhood, about these positive sort of memories of adults that were really kind to me, and how much I remember it still, which means that it must have been important, right? And it is important. And in a lot of ways, I kind of almost see that as now my generational responsibility to sort of, whatever I didn't get, like, it's an opportunity for me to now create it for this young nephew that I have. And, and it's a daily struggle. Like, I mean, even he's in daycare right now, and he's coming back with ideas like, boys shouldn't like pink, or, like, oh, like only girls wear makeup, right? Yeah. So you see this patriarchy, this machine of patriarchy, it's already in play. And when you realize that, and you're able to deconstruct your own experiences, you see just how deeply ingrained it is in the fabric of society. But for me, like, this growing male-female divide, I mean, it's a very unfortunate reality. But for me, I think it doesn't matter, like, whether you're a man or a woman, like, the values that really touch and create a much more beautiful and wonderful world, it's the same. Like, so I think it's more about that for me, and trying to break down these barriers of, like, you can't do this, or you can, but as long as it's leading to this creation of a much more kinder, like, beautiful, peaceful society and environment, I feel like it's everyone's responsibility.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, sharing such personal stories as well. I feel really worried for men because I feel like in men there's a tendency that you can destroy the world.
Yeah.
Like, like in a in a domestic situation, in a relationship, if there are issues, women can be terrible, but the likelihood that you'll get killed is very low. But then if the situation is switched, like the woman literally has to worry for her life.
That's
So the reason that I always talk about men's mental health is because at the core of emotional intelligence, which is the most basic education or knowledge or awareness that you can have to understand how you can manage your own mental health, is that as a human, you will experience the full spectrum of emotions. You talked about the opposites in the Dharma. If you're not selfish, you won't experience selflessness, right? If you don't love, then, if you don't want to experience loss, then maybe you'll never experience love, right? So it has to coexist. But the thing is, a male friend of mine told me very recently, the worst thing about being a man is having emotions. He literally said that.
Wow.
And he said, like, it was so clear and obvious that it's the struggle to manage it. And this, I think, this, to break the stigma of mental health, which exists for everyone, but it's the worst for men, it's among the worst for men, is that you're not allowed to have feelings around your struggles. But so you are judged for your struggles. And the humanity in you is not seen for your struggles. But there is nobody who doesn't struggle in life. In fact, struggle is throughout life. Life is suffering. So the fact that the stigma in men is so strong that you can't allow yourself to experience shame, experience your anger, experience your grief, so that you can deal with it. That's the goal of emotional intelligence. But people get stuck on, don't tell me to feel it. I'm not even going to acknowledge that it exists. And so by definition, you are rejecting the pathway that could help you to manage yourself.
Absolutely.
And to actually make the emotion go away. Because the longer you try to push it away, the longer it's going to stay there. As you said, the victim of patriarchy, when it comes off in violence and all that. And I feel like it's getting so bad for men, because when you look at statistics, right, globally, more girls finish from school. They are getting more and more degrees, which means they are moving further and further up the career ladders. They are doing much better. So in that setting where now marriage is an optional for women, as opposed to like, I need it,
to survive.
To survive. Now the dynamics change, and that makes things worse for men. Because for men, it's like, again, like, I need to provide. That is there, right? Now what am I providing? What is my role? That, I think that's part of why, like, men are lost. And if you look at marriage, like, the biggest thing that so for women, women get money, which you don't need anymore because you have your own, because of education. But for men, what you got was that emotional, like, support. Because they can't take it out. They're not allowed to take it out anywhere else. But at least you take it out on your wife. Like, you vent to your wife. You process it with your wife. But so now the stats show that men who get married live longer. Single men die faster. But married women die faster, and single women live longer. And they're happier. And there's also this other stats, which is really disturbing, where as you age as a couple, if one of you gets sick, the woman is more likely to stay with the man, but the man is more likely to divorce the wife if she gets, like, into a serious health situation where she might need full-time care. So all of these things, I think, like it's very easy for women to go, oh, it's because men are the worst. They suck. They are, unsavable. But for me, as a mental health advocate, I feel like I need to tap into my higher self, be responsible about it.
Yeah.
And if I truly care about mental health, then it has to include the mental health of everybody,
Yeah.
not just women or not just people like myself.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to unlearn. I don't know, the experience of being a woman or, female. I remember like a couple of years ago, I was just hanging out with a couple of friends, both like male, female, like all of us. And the girls were talking about this experience of going back home after a night out. And their journey home looks, not just physically, but even the kind of things that they think about. It's like it was a completely alien experience for men. Like for us, we just go home. That's it, like. And this, and they were telling us like they text each other and to make sure, that they're home, all that kind of stuff. Like as men that we don't have to worry about. And, earlier, this whole thing about being a provider, right? And that's just that's just scratching the surface, right? There's this whole list of performative labels that we've assigned over hundreds of years, probably. So I think at this point in time as men, we have a lot to unlearn first. And I'm also, I think, a bit scared at the world because I think, as you were saying, as a lot of these important roles that men performed to be the provider, this and that, as a lot of that is being taken away, I think a lot of men are asking themselves, then what is it that makes me a man? And that's where all of this crazy sort of, what do you call it? The woman haters? The Andrew Tate type, there's...
Incels?
Yeah, incels. Incels, yes,
or
yes.
misogynist.
No, I think incel is the more extreme form of misogyny, right? So sometimes, and they hate women, they think they should be slaves, like really far out
They think
thinking.
it's their human right to get sex from a woman.
But see, I mean, it's so ridiculous, isn't it? So
entitlement.
So I think it's at this point in time, unless we as men unlearn a lot of these things, I think the natural conclusion is that it pushes you towards that, and I think as a man, I can understand why it's appealing to a lot of young men, especially in this sort of changed reality. But I don't know. It's obviously it's a very, very, I think, complicated subject. I'm sure I've also internalized a lot. I mean, for me, I think I have the privilege of having my mother be the sole provider as I was growing up. Even with my aunt, she was the sort of head of the household figure. So for me, it never, the sort of traditional gender roles, I never really got to live in that sort of space. But I'm also, I think, I also have to challenge myself that that's not the experience of most people. And, looking at society and how it functions, I think it's very much still steeped in. But yeah, I don't know. It's, for me, maybe other people might disagree, but I tend to think that I don't sort of think of myself as being less than for, showing my emotions. And, I think I'm, by default, I don't know, it's my system setting. I think I lean towards the sort of, I'm okay with the softer side of life. And for me, I don't know, it just makes life more beautiful, like you were saying, right? There's this whole range of human experience. And why would you limit yourself to this thing? And, in that sense, sort of give in to society's demands of this is how you should be, right? And to kind of connect it back to the Buddha Dharma, if you really look at it, these are all just labels that we perform. And, what makes you a human being, a man? It's, I think a lot of it is, I don't know, it's, I mean, it's a very complicated subject. And particularly when sexuality is involved, I think then it gets even more complicated. But all that being set aside, I think I see the development of this blurring of the lines of sexuality as a good thing. because I think that means that as men, as like straight heterosexual men, we now sort of kind of have this license to open up and not be seen as less than,
Yeah.
because that's what I think men fear a lot,
Yes.
is to be seen as sort of less manly. And, I think as men, like, we go to extreme lengths to sort of prove it, which for me is always a bit sort of funny, because I always believe that if you're fully self-secure, you don't really
Need to
have
prove
to
anything
prove anything to
to
anyone, because
anyone.
and
Yes.
there's no need to, do it. But yeah, so I think there's a very deep sense of insecurity about maybe our sense of masculinity that sort of, pushes especially a lot of younger men to think that they need to, be this and look this way and, say these things and not cook or get in the kitchen and say that, like you don't know how to blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I think in that way, again, like to connect it just sort of really quickly, that's where Buddha Dharma has really helped me personally as well. And a lot of the masters, they talk about compassion, these masters are male figures, right? So thankfully, I know in this sort of tradition, there isn't that necessarily like if you show compassion, you're less than a man, like, so, and I think that's a wonderful, like, inheritance that we have.
Yeah, that's really helped me too. That I think of myself as a human before I'm a woman.
Yeah.
Because like as soon as you have a label, then like it helps to have a label because you can understand yourself, but then that understanding gets limited within that label as well. So there's an advantage and disadvantage to it. So when you say, like when I remind myself that I'm a human before I'm a woman, then there's the chance for me now to see my own humanity.
Yes, and I think this sort of sexuality is just one small sliver of our, who we are, right?
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, you're absolutely right, and I think that's how I try to view it as well, is to try and see everyone as human first, and all of the labels come like after that, and I think that really helps put things into perspective.
Thank you so much, Rigsar. We unfortunately have come to a hard stop now, but I'm sure we'll continue this conversation after the cameras go off as well. But thank you so much for coming on to Masterpeace. You've made this this new relaunch and this new era that Masterpeace is in. You're giving me the opportunity to elevate myself as a podcaster, as somebody who likes to think of myself as somebody who thinks deeply about things and who tries to live intentionally. It's been such an inspiring conversation. Time well spent.
Thank you. I really
Thank you
enjoyed
so
it too.
much.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
for
you so
having me.
much, Rigsar.